He played the lead guitar part, but it's the Beatles.
It is. It is a Beatles one.
George Harrison, I think.
Yeah. It's a good one.
And Clapton does perform it. He sings it too. I mean, now.
Yeah,
But
I could see that.
he didn't write it.
Yeah. Oh, hi everyone. Happy 2020.
Hey, welcome. This is Real Guitar Live. Are we live?
We're live. We're here.
Great.
Live and in color.
We have some great material for you today. This is my co-host, Ami Fields.
Hey, hey.
I'm Thomas. We're going to start off with a training like we do every month. And then we'll go into answering all your questions about playing and learning guitar. Please feel free to submit questions now. We'll answer some of the pre-submit questions ahead of time. And if your question's directly related to what we're asking or we're talking about, we'll deal with that right then and there. So, and then afterwards, as usual, we'll have our drawing.
Yep.
And the drawing is for those who are in my Real Guitar Success Academy and have completed the monthly practice session. So we've got some entrants that we'll deal with that in a minute. Mm-hmm. Let's start off with this training. And this came from a question from Shulamit, who was asking about, in particular, how you deal with difficult chords. Mm-hmm. And she had a song that had a bunch of what we call slash chords. So I wanted to specifically talk about slash chords.
Cool.
Slash chords, you see them all the time. And I know for a long time, I didn't really know what they were when I was first started playing.
Yeah.
I would just play kind of the first part of the chord and ignore anything after the slash. Mm-hmm. So first of all, let me explain what slash chords are.
Yes.
Slash chords are chords that have two parts to it, the main chord and then a slash, and underneath they're indicating what bass note they want in the chord.
Right.
Now in music in general, that bass note is often played in a band by the bass player or in a piano, in the low note in the piano. But for guitar, we need to finger chords that have the bass note in it, particularly if we're playing by yourself or singing along and playing. It's a little different if you're playing in a band because you divide up the sound.
Yeah.
The bass player can cover the bass line.
Right.
And there are some very common slash chords. So in general, this is kind of what they look like. So this is a C with an E in the bass. C is the main chord, E is the bass note. Here's another one, C with G in the bass. C is the main chord, and G is the bass note after the slash. Now, for guitar players, the theory is helpful to know, but not as critical as just being able to finger the chords.
Right.
And a lot of what we do is memorize chord forms and just use them. First of all, when you're dealing with a song that has a bunch of slash chords, you can probably get away with just playing that main chord without the bass note, and they're probably going to sound okay. It'll give you a good idea. The two reasons we use, or often use, slash chords. One is we're creating a bass line, like a descending bass line in the song. So here's an example. This is an E minor chord. Now I'm going to make it an E minor slash G. I'm putting a G in the bass. Now I'm making another chord. We'll call this D7 slash F sharp. I'm putting an F sharp in the bass. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a descending bass line. Open A string, G, F sharp, and then I go on to make a chord with an F in it. So it's the bass line that I'm listening for. Mm-hmm. The other reason is sometimes you just want something more interesting. And a good example of this would be I'll play a D, but I want a fuller D sound. I want a D, I want some bass note in that D. So I'll refinger it to put the F sharp note in the bass so I can get a decent bass line.
Right.
So theoretically, what I'm doing when I make a slash chord is I'm inverting the chord. In other words, excuse me. If I had a C chord, for an example, the notes would be C, E, G. Mm-hmm. And I line it straight up. C would be the bass note.
Right.
E would be the third, and G would be the fifth. C, E, G are the three notes that make a triad. I wrote that down here. C, E, G, that's the first one. Now, if I put the E note, the middle note, in the bass, I've created what we call a first inversion. Mm-hmm. Don't worry too much about this. When you're playing guitar, the actual knowledge doesn't help you directly with your playing, but it could help you both to understand what you're doing if you want to create your own chord or talk to other people. this is the first inversion, meaning that that middle note is in the bass now. So I still have all the same notes, but I put the E note in the bass. And that would, on guitar language, that would be a C/E, or I should say, pianists use that too, C/E. Now, if I took the G note, which is the fifth of the chord, 1, 3, 5, fifth, and I put that in the bass, that's when we call a second inversion. G note in the bass, here's that C and E again, it'd be called a C/G. Now, if I were to play those chords, this would be a C, the bass note being the C note. Now, I want an E in the bass, I'd simply play that open E. I still have a C chord, but with the E in the bass. That would be called C/E. Now, when I put the G in the bass, one way I could finger that would be, I use my second finger, my third finger over here. So I'm still playing the basic C chord. I'm just substituting my pinky right there for the third finger, so I can put the third finger on the G note. Now I have a C/G. C/E, bass note, C/G. Subtle differences, but sometimes it adds a little character to what you're playing, especially if you're playing by yourself. Yeah. Again, if I were playing in a band, not so critical because you got a bunch of other instruments that could be playing that bass note.
Right. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When I'm looking here at the pictures of it, so we've got like our basic C major triad, C, E, and G. And then your first inversion, you're putting the E down in the bass. Is there a reason that the G jump down an octave too? Or does it matter if that G is there, or would it stay up there?
It could go either way.
Okay.
That's a good question in general. You know when you play chords like this, C,
right.
C, whoops.
Yeah.
Those are all versions of the same three notes,
right.
But I played the notes in different places. If you saw it on a staff, it'd be up and down,
right.
But still the same three notes.
Got you. So even if this G was up there, it'd be the
I
same.
I just arbitrarily chose to put the G there, and it could have easily been up there, and it would have been a C/E.
E. And so it would not have changed with the slashes because it's not affecting the bass note.
It's the bass note.
Got it.
That puts the E over there.
Perfect.
And the same with here. I could have worked that a number of different ways.
Except you couldn't have put this C in the below the staff part.
No, then it would be.
It'd be
in the bass.
It'd be in the bass, so there would just be like a regular C triad. Aha.
Be some version of this.
So it's still basically like whatever the lowest note is what that, like that's how that works. And that's why that's just C straight up C, because C is the lowest note there.
Good. You got it.
Cool.
Okay, so feel free, ask questions as we're talking, and I'll answer them as we go. Now, how do you practice this, or how do you get a handle on these slash chords? There's a number of different ways that I encourage students. I know how I learned slash chords. And matter of fact, this is how I pretty much learned most difficult chords. I found short progressions that I liked and practiced them within the progression. First of all, it made it more fun, but it made it more practical because chords are not isolated. You don't just play a chord and that's it.
Yeah.
It's always going or coming from somewhere.
Right.
So if you practice it in context with where it's going or coming from, it's more useful, it's more practical. Mm-hmm. So here's an example. A very common chord progression that uses a slash chord on guitar players, for guitar players, is a C going to this chord, and sometimes these chords could have different names. I'm going to call it a G with a slash B, with a B in the bass. That's a B note, and the rest of the notes could be called all parts of a G chord. The G's over here, the G note, and then going to an A minor. So you've heard this note like Dust in the Wind, or Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. It's a very common progression. It's a descending bass line. You're going C, B, open A. I'm doing C chord, G/B to an A. And I wrote that down right here. C, G/B to an A minor. That's a great one to start. It's not that hard to finger, and it's very common. It's something you're very likely to come across in normal pop, country styles of music, folk.
Gotcha.
Now the next one, a little more complex, a little more difficult to finger, is descending from the A minor. Starting with A minor, now I'm going to play A minor with /G, with a G in the bass. Technically this makes it A minor 7, but because the G is the 7th note in the chord. But that's not the way I usually see it. I usually just see A minor / G.
Right.
Now I'm going to go down bass note wise to the F sharp, and I'll call this a D7 / let's see what I put.
D / F sharp.
Technically I'd say D7 because the 7th right there, the C note. So I should put a D7 / F sharp. And then I'm going to go down to, we'll call this D minor / F. That's the F in the bass. I could also call this a F major 7, depending, because of this high E. D minor doesn't have a high E note, but if I strum it, I think for simplicity we'll stick with D minor / F. It's as good as any. So again, it's A minor, put the G in the bass, go into F sharp, F. This is a good one. This is while my guitar gently weeps. And if you feel like you've got a handle on both of these, you can combine them. Start with a C to the G / B, A minor. Now I'm going to keep going. A minor with the G in the bass / G. Now I'm putting the F sharp in the bass, D7 / F sharp, and D minor / F. That sounds a lot like an F major 7. And then end on E. Good exercise. Just combine the two together. Any questions about that so far?
I don't see anybody asking any questions yet. If there are those random little ook students watching, don't know why you'd be here. But if you are here and you're wondering, we don't really deal too much with these, to be quite honest.
You don't have much bass notes on
we don't really have much room, right? We've just got the lowest string on here is a C. I mean, you could put a drop G on there, in which case it's a different story. But like, you know, you're looking at your A minor / G chord. Well, we can't really put a G any lower because the lowest note we have here is C. So we can't really do anything with that. So for those of you who are like ook listeners or like also want to apply this if you play ook and guitar, it's a little bit more challenging. What I typically do is if I see a note that's here like a slash chord, so let's say D7, and then there's a note that's not normally a part of the chord, so it's not really an inversion, but it's like a little added weird thing, so it's changing the whole structure of the chord, then I'll find a way to throw that into the chord, if that makes sense. So like D7, for example, the note F sharp is technically already in it, right? The chord itself. So I can basically play my D7 like that or like this, in which case I'd probably play it like this because it's got something different, but there's nothing else to do because the F sharp's already in there for us. Well, I mean, yeah.
One other common chord that I'd encourage you to maybe practice ahead of time is that D and putting the F sharp in the bass, refingering it like this. I use that a lot when, especially when I'm finger style guitar, when I'm playing finger style, because I really like to get a bass note in there, and D doesn't have much of a bass note otherwise, unless I do a different tuning and tune this down to D. So another way to practice this, I'd encourage first thing is to practice some common progressions, and maybe I'll make a sheet and add it to the notes so you can download it with these actual chord diagrams. But I'd encourage you, when you see a common progression that you're playing, try adding some different bass notes and experiment with it. It's kind of fun. So I have a G here. Try adding, see what it sounds like with a G in the bass on that chord. I'm going A minor, F, G. Now I'm going to do G with the C, A minor with a G, F. Can I put F with a G? I can. Watch this. And then G. That was called a pedal tone. What I did is I played the same bass note through the whole progression.
Right.
C with a G in the bass, A minor with a G in the bass, F with a G in the bass, and to G. Pedal tone.
That's cool.
And that is another use of why you might want to make a slash chord if you're trying to keep one bass note going throughout a progression.
Pedal tone.
Or what we call a pedal tone.
I've heard the phrase but never really understood it. Cool. All right. I don't have any questions so far, but we do have some pre-submitted ones. So this is a good time for those of you that are live to put any questions you have about learning and guitar playing and anything pertaining to this. Throw them in the chat now while we get to some of the pre-submitted questions. And the first one is from, I think it's pronounced Rogelio. Says, I'm having trouble by not making the chord changes in time with whatever song I practice. One, what's a good practice to do to improve the chord changing? And then there's a second part, but let's start there.
Okay. First of all, this is very common. What I often, when I meet students who have been playing on their own or had lessons somewhere else,
Right.
they play some chords and then I'll have them play a song or a progression, and I notice they'll either all the way through or at least at certain parts will slow down, try and get to the next chord because that's where the difficult chord is, and then they'll speed up again as it gets easy.
Exactly.
This is common with guitar players. Unfortunately, if you practice by yourself a lot, sometimes it gets to be a habit that's hard to break because you slow down and speed up without, after a while you don't even notice what you're doing.
Exactly.
First of all, for most guitar players I find, particularly if they're learning on their own, without some feedback, they probably need to slow down. To slow down and practice in time. I'd recommend using a metronome. Metronome's not something you use all the time you're practicing, but this is one good place for it. So for an example, if I'm practicing a C going to the G, I might strum this C 3 times, and then with a metronome, I'm going to start on the next chord, the G, right on the beat. So here's what it sounds like. Click, 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 click. No hesitation, no slow down. Click, click. I'm leaving a little space. Give me time to change. Click, 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 click. And if that gets easy, then you fill in that space. Click, 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 and change on the click, the up part, the upbeat. I call the upbeat. So here's the downbeat. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, change. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, change. And start with just 2 chords and then add a 3rd chord and so on. You can do it slow with the metronome, then pick it up little by little, and then take the metronome away and see if you can keep that steady pulse throughout.
Yeah.
The metronome gives you a measuring guide to see if you're slowing down or speeding up without really, depending on your own judgment on that.
Right. And my tip on that one, if you're like a step behind that, so let's say that you're really just like, and then you're just like, I don't even know how to get to the next chord. And you're like, you know what the chord looks like, but getting there is a problem. One thing I have my students do is actually verbally out loud talk it out to me. So let's say, for example, I'm going from the G chord to the C chord. So I'll say, okay, tell me physically what you have to do. Well, I have to lift my pointer finger and my middle finger off of the ook fretboard. I have to move my ring finger down 1 string, staying on the 3rd fret. And I make them talk through that. So you can talk yourself through those things when you're like, a step before learning how to transition is just know that you have each chord down and get in your head exactly what physically needs to happen with your fingers. So that way they start listening to you.
So that's a good in combination. Do that at first.
Exactly.
And then over time, practice so you can do that without thinking about it. Because
yes.
Sometimes, just like I've had people put like notes on the piano. Sometimes they get hung up on that extra mental step of identifying that's an A note, D note.
Right.
And that little extra bit gets in the way after a while. So you got to be willing to let that go and just let your fingers get there on time, too.
Exactly, yeah. So you want to feel it out. But for those of you that are really just like, I don't even know how to get to that point, just know that you can talk yourself through it. But I totally agree. You cannot like depend on that. You got to be able to let that go, too.
One of the things I teach in my Real Guitar Success Academy is something called common fingers. So I have students practice chords that have some fingering in common. So here's an example. I'm going from a C to an A minor. You'll notice that the 1st and 2nd fingers don't need to move. When I reach over and make the A minor with my 3rd finger, the other 2 fingers can stay there. So that's something, if you know ahead of time when you practice it, it can make it go faster and smoother.
That's right. And it's a common one to go between the 2.
And those are 2 chords that are common. I recommend practicing the ones that are common movements, not just arbitrary movements.
Yeah.
Those are ones that you'll get the most bang for your buck.
Right.
that you spend.
Same thing on the U, D minor, and F. One finger. Yeah, good. Okay, so second part of that question is, when I make the chords, my thumb seems to want to go to the side of the thumb instead of being flat on the fretboard. What can I do to play with the thumb being flat?
Okay, obviously we can't see your thumb, so I'm not sure. I'm assuming he means like this.
Right.
But I can't say that for sure.
Oh, he's going to the side of the fretboard, so like not
Flat.
being up, so like that instead of that.
Flattening out.
Okay.
Well, good hand position on the guitar. First of all, you'll see many guitar players who put their thumb up over like this. That's not wrong, and I would never change anybody who's used to playing that way. But if you're starting from scratch, I find a lot of advantages to keeping your thumb back like this, with this pad of your thumb here. It gives you just a little more reach when you start playing chords where you have to, and bar chords you pretty much have to play that way anyway. I think this is another case of slowing down and getting the individual chords before pushing ahead and playing songs with the chords. And you can do both. I don't mean just stay making chords for 6 months until you can play a song.
Right.
But take some time, a little bit each practice session, hopefully that's every day or at least 5 days a week, and just work on the chord forms that you'll be playing and getting the thumb in the right place. Take your hand off, put it back on, and then take that next little step and move to the next chord. Keep your thumb behind there. People are amazing in that they can develop a habit of doing something that just goes into complete automatic. But you have to give it time. You have to give it time and do enough correct actions to actually get that habit going. And a lot of people short-circuit it because they're in a hurry to learn a song, and I'm right there with you. I mean, this is not a criticism. I'm right there. I want to play my favorite song. But it actually takes you more, adds more stress and takes you more time in the long run to go back and fix bad habits that you created by kind of jumping into something you're not quite ready to do.
Yeah.
Balance that. Keep going back to some of the basics and getting the basics right, and then adding it back into whatever song you're trying to play. And don't try to push too hard on just getting the final song if you still need to work on the little micro habits. Getting the fingering right, for example. Changing from one chord to another in time.
Right. Yeah. Those are the things you need, the building blocks.
And balance that out.
Yeah.
Spend at least a little bit of practice time on those basics each time.
Right. Okay. We have an online question. Someone live says, the high E string is hard to bar. Please, any solutions when you're doing bar chords?
So to make it sound?
That's what I'm assuming, that you're getting this kind of thing going on, where it's kind of muting.
This is common. The two most important strings to get when you're barring are this low string, that's where the bass note usually is, unless you're making a fifth root bar, or the high E string. Now, first of all, let me divide up, let me say I quickly jumped over that. There's two main forms of bar chords that people use. The sixth string root, what that means is the name of the notes on the sixth string, and here's an example of that. I'll use the G as an example. And the fifth string root, that would be like the C chord here, or C minor. And the name of the notes on the fifth string. When you're making sixth string roots, you really need to get that low string and the high E string. So I recommend a practice. It's an exercise, and I'd start it right away, and do it a little each day for a while. It's not once and you got it. It goes like this. You bar, get the bar kind of right, and go back a little bit, even a slight curve in the finger, not flat like this. And then just play the low string and the high E. Now move up to the next note, low string and high E. And so on, third fret. If it doesn't sound, get your position again and go back. What we're doing is make sure we get the pressure on the low and the high string. These are the critical ones for the sixth string root bar chord. And then all the way, I'd go up to 7th fret for now and then all the way back down. Do that a little bit each day until you can go faster and it gets easier and easier and they sound clear. Then add your bar chords and see if that hasn't improved the sound of the high E string.
Yeah.
Now, the fifth string root, here's an example of fifth string root. For the most part, I would encourage you to not worry about it. So here's an example. I call this the A form because I'm making basically an A chord. It's a C, A, B, C. And to get that high E's to sound here is very difficult.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it. Now I'm muting the high string. There it is. You can hardly tell.
Yeah.
Now I'm making a sound. I'm going to press down. It's there, but it just doesn't make a difference. It's not worth, I don't think it's worth the extra hassle. You can keep working on it, and this exercise will still help there, but it's not the best place to put your time and energy if you want to get the most for your practice time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And over time, as you get more experience, it'll get better, though again, I don't really pay attention to that. I don't worry if the high E sounds on the 5th string root bar chords.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point too. Is just like giving it some time and space. I think if you've never played music before and you're brand new to music, it can feel discouraging because you may not be making as progress as you kind of like imagined that you would when you first started. But I mean, really, some of these things that I used to think about and worry about, specifically on my ukulele, like I can't believe I can't do that. They're just second nature for me now. And it just took time. It just took, actively practicing it, but also just kind of giving myself time to feel the instrument and find my rhythm with it.
Often when I'm learning something new, and I'm always learning something new, I want it to go like this. You learn the little piece, and then the next piece, and then the next piece, and you get it, next piece, and you get it, and they keep adding until the picture gets bigger. But it never quite works that way.
No.
It's usually a kind of, and then I feel like nothing makes sense, and then all of a sudden a bunch of stuff comes together.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the process. I tell people when they're starting music, it's one of those things where you're going to practice something 50 times wrong, and then you're going to go to bed, and the next day you'll get it right. That's just kind of how it is. So keep with it.
It helps, too, to kind of know where to put your energy and where not to. And that's why I make the big point about the 5th string root bar chord. Just don't worry about the high E, because it will likely just come on its own over time, but it's not worth your time right now. There's other things that are more important.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Shulamit has a 3-part question.
Oh, yes. No.
There we go. Okay, so Shulamit says, I've composed a song yesterday with the following chord progression. The first thing is, I want to transpose this to a different key. How can I tell what's the key?
So here's the chord progression that Shulamit gave me, and I made it big so everybody could see it. I'm taking, these are like 4 phrases of the song. I haven't heard the song, so I can only kind of guess. Now, first of all, let me talk about a key of a song. A key is what note or what chord sounds like home, which feels like you stop and rest. A song can have more than one key, but a lot of pop music, all is in one key, and it's right now I'd rather focus on where most people are going to go, and that's just figure out one key for the song. This song, by looking at these chords, I could kind of guess what key it's in, but a real deciding factor would be if I heard the melody to the song.
Right.
The melody will tell me very quickly when I hear a note that sounds like the rest in the melody. I'd say, what's that note? Find that note, and that will probably tell me the key of the song.
Right.
What I have students do, and I do have a more complete lesson on this, is I'll have them listen to a song and just go up on the bass note until they find a note that sounds like that's home. That's like a resting note. And that is almost always the key. Then you have to figure out major or minor. You can have a major key or minor key.
Right.
So I won't go into too much of that because I have a whole lesson on that and examples and how to do it. Now this song, I played it just the chorus. Now, in my ear, I could tell right away without even looking at it, just if I just heard that sound, I know that that's the home.
D, yep.
And I could analyze it and say, well, I could see that this chord is the 5 of the key of D, and it's setting it up to make D sound like the home chord. But I heard it. And music is oral in terms of ears. I heard that's the home. So if I heard the melody, I could confirm it more because I'd hear the da 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 da, and I'd hear that D note as home. But I'm pretty confident that this song, whatever melody went with this, is going to be all in the key of D.
Right.
And it fits. These are all common chords in the key of D. The D would be the 1 chord, D, E, F, G, A, the 5 chord, D, E, F, G, A, B, B minor is normally minor, and G would be the 4 chord, D, E, F, G. So yeah, intellectually I could intellectualize it, but I heard it. I heard that that's the home D. That's rest. And I could play on, and I heard it again when I came here. And it happened to end on D. A song doesn't have to end on the chord to be in that key, but it often does. And it often starts in the chord that's either the 5 or the 4 in the key. And the 5 or the 4, G in this case, is a 4 chord. So I know there's another part to this song.
Yes. So the second part is, can it be in the key of G? If so, the number 2 chord is out of key as it should be A minor, not A major, or maybe it's in the key of D.
So what she's saying is that it started on G and she's looking, these are all chords in the key of G, so maybe it's in the key of G. But that A chord, in the key of G, A is a minor chord. So G, A minor would be natural to the key of G. G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, and then the F sharp diminished. But A, it is possible you could be in the key and the songwriter will alter a chord in the key. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but amazingly it sounds good. It has a purpose in that it kind of takes you out of the key for a sec, and it adds movement to a song.
Right.
It's commonly used when you're, how could I say this? When you're giving the illusion you've just jumped into another key and then out of another key. It creates a kind of a little bit of interest. So in this song, if that was the case, if this was in the key of G, let's just say, and the A, we change it to A minor, the effect would be momentarily changing it to the key of D because the A is the 5 chord in the key of D, and the 5 chord tends to want to go to the 1 chord. So by going from G to A, I've kind of, in my ear, transposed it to the key of D momentarily, and then perhaps the other chords in the song would bring it out back into the key of G.
Yeah.
I need some G to D to really establish the key of G again.
Right.
So you see, I'm intellectualizing it, but when you hear that, it feels like you kind of went on a little journey and then came back on the path. That'd be the effect that you have.
Meaning switching that to A minor.
No, switching, if it was in the key of G, switching it to an A chord, which is not natural to the key of G.
Got it.
Natural to the key of G would be an A minor.
A minor, right.
And again, if I heard the melody, that might have been what happened. But when I played the whole chord progression, I kept hearing it come back to the D chord like it's home. So for me, this one sounds like it's all in the key of D.
Right. And third part of Shulamit's question is actually, does it really make any difference? Do they both give the same result?
Yes and no. A lot of playing songs and chords, it doesn't matter if you know what key you're in.
Yeah.
It helps in my ear, even if I can't identify the name of the chord, to just feel where home is. Because it gives me kind of a place to move from more easily. And to tell if I got off base, something's wrong. But she wants to transpose. In other words, she wants to change to a different key. And it is helpful to know what key you're in to be able to transpose.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to transpose this down to the key of C, one whole step, 2 ways I can think about it. If I know all the chords in the key of C, it would be easy for me to kind of think in terms of numbers. Each of these chords, what number is it in the key of D? And then just use the appropriate chord in the key of C to replace it. There's another way to do this, which is very common.
What's that?
Just count steps.
That's what I do.
That's what a lot of guitar players do in particular.
Yeah.
We count steps. So let's say I want to go, I don't know what key it's in. I don't care what key it's in. I just want to change it one step down. In other words, this note, one step, that's a half step, 1 fret. One whole step is 2 frets. So from here down to here. So that'd be a G, go down 2 steps, be an F. I want to make it the same kind of chord, so it's to be in an F major. Now the next one, A, down 2 steps. A, down half step would be, I'll call that G sharp. Whole steps down to G. I'll just make that a G. Again, G major. Let's go to the B. I'd go down a whole step from B. B, B flat, A. But I'd want it to be an A minor. I keep the quality of the chord the same.
Right.
So I don't even need to know what key it's in. I can move everything down 1 whole step or 2 whole steps. A little more complicated the farther away you get. You have to count more. But
Yeah.
And the same thing going up. If I went up from G, I'd count up A. Now that chord would be an A major, because it's an A major. That's the way I did it for years, until I got familiar with the main keys of the guitar.
Yeah.
I often recommend that students start that way, get a sense of, we call it intervals, the distance between notes.
Right.
And it allows you to move pretty easily between keys that are close to each other.
Yeah.
It's harder as you get farther away, where you have to count more.
Right.
Then little by little, get to remember the common keys for the guitar. And that's C, we went through this last week. C, G, D, A, and E.
Yeah.
I counted up 5. C, C, D, E, F, G, G, A, B, C, D, D, E, F, G, A, A, B, C, D, E.
There you go.
The 5 most common keys for the guitar.
Oh, that's a good way to remember that. Just keep counting 5. Another one of our online folks says, playing half step down helps me in bar chords. Is it okay to practice half step down tuning, or should I practice in standard tuning?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
What she's saying is she tunes everything down a half step. So this E right now would actually be E flat, and so
Right.
on, everything down a half step.
Yeah.
This is fine, and a short answer. And there are quite a few rock guitar players who do that, because it's a little easier to bend notes. If everything's down a half step, everything's a little looser, and it's easier to bend notes. It gives a slight different quality to the sound of the guitar going
Right.
down a half step, but it's not a big enough difference to be a bad thing. And sometimes you even like it. It makes it a little more, when you strum, it's a little looser, so it sounds a little brushier. It is a problem when you go to play with somebody else. Either they have to tune down a half step, or you have to put the capo on and make sure you guys are all nice and tuned together.
Right.
And the same thing when you're playing along with like a YouTube video or something. You need to know where the guitarist, if he's tuned
Exactly.
regular and you're a half step down, you're going to have to put that capo on.
Yeah.
All said and done, it's a viable technique that I would say would suit, depending on your situation, a lot of people.
Yeah. Would you go much more than a half step down, though?
I have heard of people going a whole step down, but it does start changing the whole tone of the guitar.
Right.
And you'd have to experiment with that and see if you're okay with that. In general, I'd probably stick with a half step.
Gotcha. Cool. So, like, if you were trying to transpose a song a step and a half down because it's too high for you and you want to sing with it, detuning your uke is not, or your guitar is not really going to be the best method.
Probably not. Mostly because you get that low, the sound of the guitar is going to sound kind of wobbly, I would say.
Yeah.
As it sounds kind of, all the strings are very loose.
Right.
It would be easier to press down, and if you put a capo on it, theoretically, if you're perfectly attuned, you put your capo on properly, you could put the capo on and get back up to regular tuning if you want to play with somebody else.
Oh, yeah. Right. No, that's true. Cool. Well, I don't think that there are any other online questions right now, but this is a good time to submit them if you guys do have any other questions for either of us. And you ready to do a drawing?
Let's do a drawing.
Okay.
While you guys are submitting questions or not, let's do a drawing. These are people who have completed the practice session for the month of December 2019. This is the first for RGS Live in 2020.
2020.
The first of the year.
Yeah.
So let's see. We put all their names in the hat, and we're going to pull out one name. We're going to give a $50 Amazon gift card to the winner.
Okay. The winner is Shulamit.
Shulamit, congratulations, Shulamit. Good work. And
Awesome.
all of you are winners. If you've completed the practice plan, you've got some great lessons under your belt, and congratulations for completing the month's practice plan.
Love it.
Any other questions for today?
I'm not seeing any. We gave folks some good amount of time, so I think we can call it a wrap.
We're going to call it a wrap. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us here today. We'll see you again next month, the first Tuesday of the month, 12 noon.
First Tuesday of the month. That's February.
That's California time, 12 noon.
February 4th.
February 4th. Good to know.
All right.
Bye for now.
See ya. What key were you playing there?